Hey guys. We got special guest Sarah Jamieson coming on today. Really excited for this topic. We're going to talk on transitional training, mainly as it relates to women, especially prepartum, pre and postpartum. So really excited to dive into this. Here's Sarah here. We're going to get her linked up. As soon as she's linked on here, we'll get going with it. Sarah.
Hey, Dave, how are you?
Good, good. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's officially
Yeah.
nice to meet you in person, as they say.
I know. I love how it works, the face-to-face component of not having to quite be face-to-face, but
Yeah.
I'm really excited to have you on. I know a lot of interest. I've had a lot of male guests on here, and not that those topics aren't applicable to females, but having someone who specializes in it, just as you do, to be able to talk a little bit on transitional training and as that relates to those looking to have a baby at some point, or for many of those that have already had one. So
Yeah.
yeah, appreciate you coming on, and excited to dive into it. So let's just start with, I kind of want to hear your training background, and it can be professionally as well, but how that's sort of changed and evolved over the years.
Yeah, of course. Well, so it's interesting because when you sent me the question, like, oh, so have you done athletics and what does that look like? And I've always been athletic, but I've never athlete. And it's interesting because throughout high school, played some sports and then got into long distance running quite early, around the age of 19. And it's really funny because I originally got into running as a way to commute to and from college, and as a way to really kind of like ask myself the big questions. And then it became something I just fell in love with and was very passionate about it. And that led to half marathons, full marathons, ultra marathons. And it was my bag for about 22 years. And then around the age of 25, I started running a little bit more professionally for charities and raising money and doing all of that. I also got into personal training at the age of 19 as well, just because I loved lifting weights and I loved running. And I was like, hey, you know what? Why don't I do this as a business?
Sure.
And I mean, that was during the Hotmail era. Like, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, none of these things. So it's been a great journey. And professionally, I've worked in big boxes. I worked for boutique gyms. I've worked in clinics as well as movement coaches alongside physiotherapists and pelvic physiotherapists, chiropractors. So it's been a big gambit. And, it's been a real interesting transition also as a professional woman in this industry, and now as a mom, a full-time mom.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm 18 months postpartum myself. I've got a son. And we had some fertility issues, a few miscarriages along the way, which really kind of empowered me to look at the landscape of how to address women's health in a more holistic manner. And that's really kind of how everything has kind of come full circle for me, working in women in transition, whether that be transitioning through fertility, choosing to maybe start a family, but not quite sure what that means, lifestyle wise and training wise, to postpartum. And if there's one thing that I've learned through this journey, is that we do not have enough support services for women. We do not have enough knowledge and education around what it means to go through this amazing transformation of pushing a human out into the world and then being responsible for it, because it's more than just training. It's looking at the lifestyle as a whole and parenting as a whole as well, because dads are part of this equation as well. So I'm pumped that there's you've had a lot of guys show interest and men show interest in, like, hey, yeah, because over 60% of PT clients are women.
Yep.
Right? That's what the stats are showing us.
Yeah. And so does your own journey lead you into, because I know you work with a wide range of populations, but women do make up a big part of that. And how much of that is leading up to pregnancy? How much of that is people transitioning after they've had a baby? What's the breakdown look like? And kind of the life cycle. Do people seek you through that whole process, or where's the entry point for a lot of people in that sense?
That's a great question. So prior to having my son, I would say that about 60% of my clients were actually male, and the other 40% were actually women that were going through menopause or perimenopause or had children. But actually, when we were working with their clinicians, so most of my clientele are some form of injury or in pain, right? Whether that be, daily lifestyle pain or an actual post-op of some sort. And most of my referrals come from clinicians. So I work alongside a lot of clinical practitioners with my clients. But what we found was that a lot of the times through the birthing process, through whether it be non-traumatic or traumatic birth, I mean, all birth is traumatic, is that we were having a lot of women that had like incontinence issues, that were having to go to the bathroom 2 or 3 times in a session. These things, and they chalk it up to like, well, I've had a couple kids, I'm pushing 50s and 60s. That shit shouldn't happen. Like that stuff, we can do some really, really great work to reinforce better mechanics so that you don't have to play that card all the time. However, from, through my journey of my miscarriages, and then I documented a lot of my pregnancy as well, and started working with women who were also pregnant at the same time that I was. I worked up into about a month before I gave birth. And so it shifted a little bit in regard to who I was coaching. And, a lot of women were going through infertility. And we are seeing statistically, 51%, I think now it's upwards of 51% now. People are spending way more time, more than a year, trying to get pregnant. Yeah.
So that's something that you've experienced on your own and seen with, I'm sure, people that you're working with. What role are you taking in that? Is that through the training they're doing? Is that, I'm guessing it's a pretty holistic thing, if you want to talk on some of the other factors that go into that too, for those that are interested.
Yeah, so on the movement side of things, so my conduit is always movement and behavioral based coaching. So I'm also an NLP practitioner, which is neuro linguistic programming. So we kind of look at where neuroscience meets kind of language, the words that we use, how that impacts our belief systems and our values, and then coaching kind of through personal development, and then using movement as well as a tool. But I always work alongside like a naturopath or a fertility clinic or a holistic doctor, physiotherapist as well, depending on, especially pelvic physiotherapists. So it's usually, that's what I mean by like the holistic, is that, I'm part of that team. It's not just me, but a lot of it is really, so 2 things is, number one is it's structure versus function, right? So structurally or biochemically, there can be things that we need to look at. And sometimes that could be looking at, okay, well, sleep, lifestyle factors. What lifestyle factors could be preventing you from being able to become pregnant? We don't know why women miscarry. A lot of the times, a lot of the people that I work with have absolutely no issues at all. It's just a waiting process, but stress and sleep and poor eating and all of the same things that as trainers or coaches, we're dealing with exactly the same questions. We're just looking at it through the lens of a woman wanting to become pregnant and wanting to create the best environment for her body so that she can carry a baby full term and can have an as easy as you can, birth as well in postpartum period. So it's a little bit of everything, but for me, the training side is always reinforcing, proper alignment. We look at pelvic floor. We look at kind of postural issues, any red flags that might be in the system as well, because if you have pain or if you have some form of high level movement dysfunction, we want to clean that up before you start going through the process of becoming pregnant, being pregnant, and then being postpartum. Because once you're pregnant, there's only so much we can do, right? Yeah. So because your body's going to change very, very rapidly. And we have to factor that in. So we're no longer trying to clean things up as much as we are getting your body ready to carry this beautiful being into the world.
And now when you say, I know the posture plays a big role in that and how they're moving, but are there general things that you tend to see that people can benefit from a movement standpoint leading up to pregnancy? I know there's a lot out there on what you should be doing, how much you should be doing from a workout movement standpoint leading up to it. And I know it's very individualized in terms of what their background is, there's a lot of factors that play, but do you see things that are fairly consistent that people could benefit from?
100%. Yeah. It's, so one of the questions I always have to look at is if someone's doing too little or if they're doing too much, right? So I work with a lot of women that come through the CrossFit model, right? So they're training very, very heavy, high stress, high threshold, lots of volume, lots of intensity, 4 or 5 days a week. But we know that can, not create the best environment, because parasympathetic response, we need we need a certain amount of recovery in order for our body to be like, okay, this is viable. I'm really ready to conceive this child and then carry it along. The too little side of things as well is when we're dealing with a sedentary population and we're dealing with a whole other ball game of issues. So if we look at both of those, you know, those are kind of like the end spectrum. Most people fall somewhere, you know, in between of that. But primarily, I mean, if we're looking at a baby, we're looking at posterior chain strength. We always want to reinforce that. We want to reinforce being able to move through developmental patterns, because as you get larger, it's going to be harder to move. We want to make sure that you're able to get down and off the ground. So how can you, you know, move in on the ground, rolling pattern, half kneeling, tall kneeling. We look at spinal change as well. So posture is a huge one, reinforcing optimal posture. Our spine changes a lot when you become pregnant. You get more lordotic in the lower spine. You get more kyphosis in the thoracic spine. Your center of gravity changes. So the top three that I always really like to focus on and stress when working with women that are either in the preconception phase or are pregnant are posterior chain strength, posture, and then really working those developmental patterns to a point of where they can still feel physically good to be moving around on the ground.
Yeah, that's great. And what, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of parallels between what a lot of people could benefit from in general, but being able to, you know, strategically know at which phases, though I know there's other factors, like you said, as their body changes in physical ways, there's ways you have to modify, can't get away with doing the same things.
Yeah.
How long are you working with? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, the other side of the fence too is the lifestyle, right? So one of the things that I do find that is often left out of programming is not looking, kind of having the foresight of, okay, so once the baby's here, well, now you're picking up a baby, you know, 75, 80 times a day. My baby's 30 pounds. He's a bit of a bigger boy. My husband's like 6'3", so I definitely did not take after the 5'1" little one. And so it's like I'm literally like forward carrying this kid all day long. So that posture aspect is huge. There are a lot of musculoskeletal changes that happen through pregnancy, and a lot of that, I mean, if we think of just where our belly is, the visceral pulling, all the organs have to redistribute up into the diaphragm, breathing, all of these things have to be factored in. And when we are having to carry a baby around in the world, nurse, you know, every 2 hours on and off, I mean, I'm still nursing, it's 18 months. There's so many things that we have to look at from a programming perspective to make sure that as we program more intelligently for women, we do so in the first and second trimesters effectively. And the third trimester is really about birth prep. It's just getting the body ready to like push this little baby out into the world.
So you typically work with people right up until pregnancy, and then how soon after as well?
Ideally, I like to work with people for an entire year, if possible. If possible. And I'm very realistic when someone comes to me and says, hey, you know, love what you're doing, followed your journey, which is usually how it happens. How do I get started with you? And a lot of, you know, my work isn't so much like weekly. It's more kind of monthly programming with check-ins. It's communication, as I mentioned, to their other healthcare providers. And my goal is really to set them up for success as they move through, but also teach them how to self-regulate and self-manage their programming as well. Because once that baby is born, it's a very different routine, very different ritual that the mother's going to go through when trying to program. There's different phases that I work with as well. So, you know, the recovery phase is anywhere between 6 to 12 weeks. I like to aim on the greater side of 12 weeks. Again, it's unique. It's independent to each woman. But the 6-week time phrase where, you know, standards, we say that after 6 weeks of birth, you can, you know, get back into exercise and fitness. I think this is too short. I needed an entire, literally 3 months before I could get into any sort of like basic movement apart from walking. And just kind of like literally my recovery was long. So it does depend, but traditionally, for a postpartum phase is you've got your recovery phase, and that's really you're still healing from the trauma of the birth. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, fascial remodeling takes what, years? And all of a sudden you build this human in 9 months, your pelvis separates to push it out into the world. And we're like, yeah, you get back into it in 6 weeks. Yep. I'm like, No, I sneeze, I pee. I'm not doing that yet. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so the 12 weeks for me is after that 6 week period, then it's 12 weeks. And then I start after that 12 weeks, it's really about self-care and healing. It's what do you need? You want to get the woman out and about as much as possible. It's more about self-care, and then it starts about rebuilding. So rebuilding the foundation. And that's really going to look at, you know, what she went through that pregnancy. Was there any issues, any pain? Afterwards, was there any like DRA, any separation of the abdominals, any pelvic floor issues, any tearing? Like it's a gambit. So it really is individualized, but most commonly that's a 12-week phase as well. I like 12-week phases because I find that's a long enough time to really deep dive, but it's short enough where in 3-month cycles you can really kind of see some change and some difference, but also be able to really deep dive into more of the lifestyle as well.
So would you say, so it sounds like there's lifestyle, the lifestyle component of it, there's your overall like movement, the, I guess, biomechanical strength, mobility, movement, and then, so the other part, just like natural recovery process and those things that are outside of the control. And what, I mean, just listening to you talk about it, there's just a lot of factors, and we haven't gone through, we don't have kids yet, but
yeah,
just like, it seems like there's so much. And like you talked about at the beginning, such little information and education around it. Do a lot of people know about this stuff? Or I know the people that are more proactive about it seek out the help, but how much of this is common knowledge and how much is just missing and people are kind of left on their own?
I think a lot of it honestly is missing in the sense of, like when we think about our education, whether you come through a strength conditioning platform, or if you come through, you know, the personal training side of things, or if you go to university, you're not really taught how to work with fundamentally pregnant and postnatal women. So there are companies out there that are giving the education. Girls Gone Strong is one of the companies that I'm really close with, and they've done a phenomenal job of getting more information out there. But I mean, most people, if you say, hey, organ prolapse, did anybody know that you could have pelvic organ prolapse from, you know, delivering a baby? Most people are like, well, what is that? Well, 60% of women have that. Like I had rectocele prolapse. So, and I think it's an important conversation to have because we aren't offering women, and we aren't offering the industry, our health and fitness industry, with the information that they need in order to work with these populations, which is why, you know, I always say, whether, no matter what, you know, gender you are for a trainer, get certified in pre and postnatal, because you are going to be working with women that, you know, 80% of your clients, if they're women, they're going to either want to have a family at some point in time, will have had a family, or are pregnant, right? It's going to be a given for the most part. So it's really important that we impart this knowledge on trainers and on the general population. I mean, even for me, having my knowledge, there were lots of gaps and lots of holes that I had to navigate in and around, and also lots of learning during my own journey. And one of the biggest things that I didn't personally factor in, which is why I talk about lifestyle so much, is how much your lifestyle actually changes. It changes so much, especially for the woman, because of nursing, right? It's like, I got to be back in like 90 minutes because my kid's got to get on the boob. You know, like there's so much that goes into really the transformation and change of identity, of moving from an independent person in the world to a person that is now dependent on you as a mother or as a father or as a parent. And that fundamentally is the biggest challenge that I see. People want to, you know, get back into the gym. They want to do the work, but it's actually fitting that in and around your family versus fitting your family in and around that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're working with someone, how much are you doing all the programming for them? And there's probably an assessment thing and some of the lifestyle coaching you talked about. Are those pretty like symmetrical in terms of how much time goes into those, or would lifestyle play a higher role even than the other ones, or how do you kind of break that down?
Yeah, so the assessment is always first and foremost. I believe that for any population is that we have to test. We have to figure out what the baseline is for starting. So if I have a client that comes to me and says, hey, I'm 6 weeks postpartum and you know, I really want to get started back in fitness, you know, my first question is like, great, are you working with a pelvic physio? And if so, you know, is it okay if I contact them? Can we discuss? And we'll discuss that in the consultation, but I like to get the other healthcare practitioners' guidance on that as well. And if not, that's okay too. Then, you know, for me personally, I will work with them to do a bit more of an assessment. I still do the biomechanical assessment. So I do an FMS. I have a durability screen that I work with that basically breaks down the parts of the body, the joints of the body. And then we make sure there's no, you know, diastasis recti, and which is DRA, the separation of the abdominals. And if everything looks like it's good to go, then we start from there. And we start with the same process, recovery and healing. Even if somebody aces the screen, is like, I'm feeling awesome, my birth was fine, I still go through the same process, because it's in here that we have to focus on as well. And that's where the lifestyle change comes in. So if you're not getting enough rest, you're going to be, and no mother is until basically I think they leave for college. But at least in the first couple of years, you're like, my God, I got an hour and a half. That was amazing. Like consecutively. And we co-sleep. So it's like, I'm up like 75 times a night, but it feels much better because I don't have to get out of bed. So, you know, pros and cons, but the lifestyle is huge. So it's, the programming is, you know, month to month or in person. There's also some face-to-face coaching. So meaning off the floor as well. And that's really dependent on the person. I don't have any cookie cutter programming or anything like that. I really love to be able to take each person as an independent. And I mean, there's some fundamentals, but it's really unique per woman.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good points that, like you mentioned, asking them if they're working with someone. And I feel like there's not a lot of awareness around seeing a pelvic PT. I think it's something that everyone probably should at some point after birth. But when's your, from a trainer standpoint, when's your kind of, when you refer out, when do you refer out and also keep working with them? Or do you have any set guidelines for that? Or for, I guess, for trainers that may be working with someone who comes to them? First off, I know you said they should be, what were the educations that you said they should take? Were there certain ones for pre and post? Yeah,
pre and postnatal. Girls Gone Strong is the one that okay. I've used personally. That by far is the most robust that I've seen.
Okay. And then, so obviously getting educated on it, and not just assuming that you know what's going on. But then where's your kind of referral standards for when you know some of those red flag items that something isn't right?
Well, if I'm working with someone who's preconception or pregnant, I will almost always recommend to see a pelvic physio, even if they don't have any symptoms. So that's first and foremost. And I think that's an important thing to consider, because as trainers, when there isn't a problem, and we don't usually think about referring out, but so much changes in a pregnancy that if you can have a woman go and see a pelvic physio, like for me, I went before we got pregnant, and then I went during my entire pregnancy and postpartum, even just to have everything checked. Because if your pelvic floor is super overactive and then you're doing a lot of Kegels, it's going to be harder to dilate during your birthing time. If you're underactive, then obviously you want to get the pelvic floor ready to go. But if we're in postpartum period, is any type of separation that is more than a few inches, I'm not comfortable with. So I want to make sure that I get somebody in to really assess and adjust, and so that I can have the knowledge that I need to make sure that nothing else is going on there. Pelvic floor, if there's tears as well, then any type of graded tear, that's something that I want to take into consideration as well. So if a woman does come in and hasn't seen a pelvic physio, and is like, yeah, I had some tearing, I will always recommend. And it's very rare when a woman's like, yeah, no, that's not for me. I'm like, we're dealing with your baby maker. So most women are like, yeah, just sign me up. Where am I going? And especially with organ prolapses, almost every postpartum woman, you've got to see a pelvic physio. I don't care if you were totally fine down there the whole time, because some women are walking around with pop and don't know it. So it's really, really important. I think also it's not something that you're going to get from your GP or your midwife. They're not going to assess that. So when they're doing your checkups post-labor, they're not looking for those things. Like if you're torn, they're going to check to see scar tissue and things like that, but they're not going to be looking for organ prolapse. That's not that kind of in their mostly not in their wheelhouse.
So at a minimum, what are the, I guess, for someone who's from an individual standpoint, who's they're going through the pregnancy process, at a minimum, they should be seeing trainer pelvic PT at what points?
If going is already pregnant, you mean?
Not yet. So
Okay.
planning to get
Just,
pregnant.
yeah.
Mhm.
I would say if you're planning it, 6 months. So for instance, like, I guess the best way to, if we look at like a red blood cell has a shelf life of, not shelf life, an expiry of like 120 days, right? So that's about 4 months. So if you're supplementing, prenatal supplements, is if we think of it that way, you want your entire body to be saturated with absolutely everything out of that prenatal, all of your vitamins, all of your nutrients, because you're going to conceive that baby under the best circumstances. So I like to look at it in that context of that. If you're thinking about having a baby, go now. Go and get all of the testing that you need to get done from a pelvic physio. See your naturopath about, you know, optimal prenatals, not just off the shelf that's $12.99. Make sure that you're getting the stuff that you need. So 4 to 6 months is usually, for me, that's what I like to recommend. And I just look at that just from the red blood cell. So I don't know where I got that from back in the day, but it's just like, well, if it's 120 days till all of your blood is saturated with whatever you need, let's go with that.
Yeah.
Not so sciencey, but that I find is,
I like it.
Yeah, most women will come by and be like, hey, I'm thinking about having a baby, you know, in a couple months. I'm like, okay, well, you know, if it's going to be 2 months, let's get you in to see a pelvic physio. Let's make sure that everything's good to go. What's your blood work like? And then let's start moving forward. But 4 to 6 months.
Okay. And then
give yourself a good window.
Yeah. Once they get pregnant, then at what, are there certain checkpoints you tend to recommend? Or I know the training, I guess, what's the minimum, I don't say minimum training frequency, but if someone's hesitant to using a trainer, because I know you mentioned yours is more like supervision a lot of times in terms of monthly check-ins. Is that something you would recommend that most people should take part in?
Yeah, I think it's going to be independent to the woman and family. I mean, there's always like different barriers of time, cost, distance, all of that. I do a fair amount of online coaching, so I can't physically be with them all the time. Even in my own Vancouver practice is working in the corrective exercise realm, is I really only see people max 2 times a week. So 1 time a week is enough for me to be able to set somebody up for success. I think it's also important, you know, to understand someone's accountability and where they fit into that model. If they're going to a fitness class of some sort, factoring that in, you know, regards to how much somebody should be training, you should be moving every day. You should be moving something every day, 100% hands down. The more active you are within, you know, context, not, you know, CrossFit 4 times a day, seven days a week, 365 days a year. But whatever it is you're doing, that, you know, you don't have to shift your life that much. You just have to take some considerations in, which is where's your postural stability? How strong are you right now? Are there any deficits you need to work on, so that you're the healthiest mom that you can be? Because as soon as you choose to become pregnant, in my mind, you're a mom, because now you're thinking about something larger than yourself.
Yeah, and the more supervision you can have with that, I think is better. A lot of people, I'm sure, try and go at it on their own, and it not that it doesn't work out. It obviously, you know, there's ways to do it, but why not get supervision for something as important as it is?
It is. And, you know, we do live in a digital age where you can YouTube or Instagram absolutely any exercise and get a download of, here are the top 10 pre-pregnancy or pregnancy or postpartum exercises. Those are all great, but they might not be for you. So it's really, really important to own that autonomy in the world, that you need what is best for your body and what has shaped you up into this time. So that effectively is such a huge and empowering component for people to understand, that get what you need from your body, like what's based on your body. So the supervision side of that is huge.
And I think you kind of answered my follow-up question, but there's the benefit of having so much information out there on YouTube and Instagram and people posting stuff, but some of that a disadvantage too, in terms of there's probably some I don't say wrong information, but information that's not specific to the person who's opening it, and that can get people into trouble, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, of course. And, you know, I think from a marketing standpoint too, one of my salty pet peeves is that we have so much marketing around, hey, you're postpartum, you just had a baby, call me, get back to your pre-baby body. That pisses me off, because you don't have a pre-baby body anymore. You popped a human out. Your body's changed. Yeah. You know, like my body's never going to be the same that it was before, nor should it. You know, I'm 40 years old. I'm not 20. that there is this shift that you are literally navigating a new human form, and it's a beautiful and strong human form, because a lot of the marketing is pre-baby body and get strong from your pregnancy, or get stronger from having a baby. I'm like, dude, that was the biggest competition I ever had. 46 hours, 32 at home, like that was primal shit. Like best rep, last rep. So I don't need to get stronger. But there is, I think it goes with anything else, like corrective exercise, physio exercises. Everybody likes to Google like how to rehab a knee. It's the same philosophy. Pregnancy and postpartum should be dealt with the same efficacy, the same standards that we look at injury prevention, that we look at anything, strength and conditioning, performance. You can't Google that stuff. You just can't. When it comes to individual needs, you can't, because you got to go on what your testing is, how your body has shaped you.
Yeah, I think it is a tough challenge, because we want to, there's a lot of people out there that want to promise things that we can't, like injury prevention. We can create more resiliency with your joints and fix mobility and strength limitations, but to some degree we can't prevent injury, or at least sometimes not even with exercise. Sometimes it's just a programming, a volume standpoint. I mean, there's so many things at play, or in sport you can't guarantee injury prevention, but that's the stuff that sells, unfortunately, and can attract people to a quick fix or one magic thing that they can just follow. That's a template, but we're ever changing, and look at pregnancy and we're more ever changing than even just regular daily living. So I think those things are, how would you recommend people to weed through that, in terms of what's good information, what's stuff that they can take, what's stuff that they should be cautious of?
Well, I think, if you're looking for good recommendations, I think, there are a few people that you can reach out to, or governing bodies that you can reach out to. I mean, I know BirthFit and Girls Gone Strong are two of the main ones right now, that, have kind of saturated the market. Jessie Mundell's another one. She's Canadian, so I like her. She's got a postnatal specialist certification as well. And anything, I mean, locally could just be as good. I mean, we've got BCRPA here in Vancouver, and in BC, and they're phenomenal. I think the biggest one is, if you are a trainer or a coach, is making sure that you do get certified in that, and you learn as much as you can about how to transition women when it comes up. It might not be a large part of your population, but it's going to be one of the most important. And for general population, same thing. Most of these organizations allow non-trainer individuals to take courses. Ownership over your own health. Acquiring, if you are looking for a trainer, then making sure that they are certified in pre and postnatal. And we are in a time where we do have to do a lot of our own research now on how to take back ownership over our health. Healthcare standards have changed globally in the US and Canada, and so I think it's up to us, 50%, to really go out there and do our own due diligence to get as much information as we can. And the other 50% is on the education side of, if you're going to be a trainer, make sure that you have that knowledge to work with that individual. And if you don't, then make sure that you are within your scope of practice. And if you're not sure, refer out. And for me, like I do corrective movement and movement coaching. If I don't do performance, I don't program performance, I will send them to somebody that I know of. You've got to know what you can work with and what you can't.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's really well said. And as you're talking there, I know we talked about red flags for trainers in terms of working with this population, but for this population, so whether, I guess more so postpartum or during pregnancy, what are red flags for a trainer they're working with, of maybe things they're doing or not doing that they should be aware of?
Meaning like exercise selection wise?
Meaning like, so you're pregnant, you go to a trainer. Are there red flags when you talk about them being qualified to be working with you in terms of things they're doing or not doing? I know you mentioned like promising pre-baby body. Are there things that people can be looking for that should at least raise awareness that maybe it's not the best choice of practitioner for them? Yeah,
I think, a few things is it can come down to, I mean, I think if you're new and you go in and you have a rapport with the trainer, then you might want to try them on. right? If you're not looking at the resume, I'm a big fan of looking at people's resumes, right? So if I'm going to follow somebody, and nowadays most people are finding trainers, you know, through online purposes, not just locally, right? Or through Facebook or something along those lines. So part of that is going to be the clients they're already working with. What does that look like? Is it for me? Are they working with pregnant clients? Asking the question, hey, have you worked with a lot of pregnant clients or postpartum clients? And if they're like, yeah, a couple, me, then you probably have a real good answer, right? It's kind of common. Worked with a lot of pregnant women. Okay, well, you know, you don't always have to ask for somebody's certification, but it can be just an easy conversation of like, okay, well, you know, this is where I'm at, and maybe I'm in my first trimester or my second trimester. Understanding that if you need, like, your trainer needs to have worked with women in that, you know, modality in that time in their life in order to really be able to successfully transition them through it. A specialist. I'm a big fan of, like, if I have to refer out to somebody else, I will refer out to somebody within the scope that I work in.
Yeah, I think that's great. That answers it well, because I know, like you said, being proactive with asking those questions and things, that not just taking for granted of, well, their website said they're a specialist, and what does that mean? So being able to ask those follow-up questions, and I guess have some guidance, because you are trusting them with a big part of your life and your body, and that those are big decisions to make. So making sure you're finding the right person. What's and
it's, I think also.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was going to say, and the other thing too is that, you know, as you know, anybody that uses a service, if you are doing an exercise, like let's say you're in your second trimester and someone asks you to do some plyometrics or do some crunches, I'm probably going to say no. I think as a woman is, most of us end up doing, you know, and I've pulled a lot of women, you know, working with them, is that they will know when things are not right, right? So at any point in time, if you're using somebody's service and you're like, I'm not feeling like this is right for me, don't do it. You have the power. Like, we might be trainers and coaches and we're the educators, and that's why it's really important for us to be educated, because people are, like you said, we are in the power position in respect to the investment that they're making. But at the end of the day, the person who's actually in power is the client, because it's going to be their choice whether or not they want to buy in or not, whether or not they think they should be doing that or not. And if they're hesitant on something, we as the professional need to take a step back and be like, oh, this person feels apprehensive about the client that I've programmed for them. That's my fault. So I need to do my due diligence to better understand, is this person someone that I should be working with, or, you know, can I program for this individual?
Are we caught up here?
So it's our responsibility in this industry to own up to that as well.
Yeah. I think we had a delay in some of the sound there. Can you hear me now? You there, Sarah? Okay. Okay. I think we're caught up now. Cool. Yeah. So what does your programming look like in terms of, so someone reaches out to you online and says, like, hey, I want to work with you. I'm at this, so let's talk postpartum, for example. They reach out to you, and what does that process look like?
Still there?
Yep.
Oh yeah. I think so. Was there a lag? Yeah, I can hear you. Yep. Well, I mean, consultation is going to be the first one. So intake process is always, I've got a intake specific one for postpartum that they fill out that's pretty robust. And that's really a starting point for self-reflection as well. Is it's about 45 pages, and it goes through everything, you know, that how their pregnancy was, questions specifically related to pregnancy, to fertility and conception, as well as menstrual cycles and ovulation prior to that. It goes through how their postpartum period has been, how their time has been. So it'll go through kind of, you know, check by check, just giving me a good general idea as to how, you know, how the pregnancy postpartum period has been. And then from that point, it's the assessment. So consultation will all have assessment, and that's, again, I feel things that, you know, that everybody will go through, and then it's specific postpartum client. And then the programming itself is really, if they're pretty early on into the recovery phase, then we're going to be looking at pelvic floor, right? We're going to be looking at breath work, posture. Those are always start with. I don't until feel that they're ready, and as I mentioned, that could be weeks. Not to say that we're not going to be looking at hinging and knees up and, you know, at mechanically disadvantaged postpartum, right? Starting to, you know, shift back. So there's going to be more kyphosis that we're going to have to you know, enhance all the baby and the organs and all of that. So breath work is always fundamental. And that's going to be all guided also by.
You there, Sarah? I think we're delayed again. Might be having some tech difficulties here. You there? Not seeing or hearing you. Let's see if this works. We back in business?
Hello.
Hey. Yeah, I think it was weirdly delayed there. Yeah, I was trying to follow, and yeah, your mouth was moving to some degree, but the video was either delayed or the video was first and the sound was really delayed. But looks like we're good now. So, where we leave off? I know it got a little cut there at the end.
I believe you asked me process was for programming for postpartum. Did you catch Cole's?
Yeah, that'll work good.
Okay. Yeah, so always starts with the intake process. So I've got a relative lengthy questionnaire that I like to offer first and foremost, because it's also a great self-care component and self-reflection component for someone to kind of take and acknowledge. And so a lot of that is looking at how their pregnancy went, specific questions related to each trimester, all type of other healthcare practitioners they've been working with, preconception, fertility or infertility, lifestyle as well. And then, you know, really hammering in kind of goals and you know, their readiness to commit to moving forward, and just basically same type of intake process you would have with any type of client. The difference is we're just expanding out the preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum components of that, because of the fact that it's such a laborious thing for your body to go through. And so there's that, and then assessment is really based per client. For the female is, you know, I will look at, you know, an FMS screen and components of biomechanical readiness. We look at, you know, also the other concern too is that if a woman is still breastfeeding, then her joints are going to be still really lax. So prolactin is still being produced in the body. So someone's mobility is actually going to be way better, or over mobile in my case. Anywhere if they're breastfeeding upwards of however long that takes. So little things like that need to be factored into someone's programming. But for the most part, if they're postpartum, it's postural retraining. It's retraining the pelvic floor as well, which again, I like to do with the guidance of a pelvic physio. Chiropractor as well, depending on and so a lot of that is really just, again, it's healing itself. It's allowing the body the time that it needs to no longer having a baby in it, because that takes time as well. It's not just once the baby's out, everything is rosy. Its organs have to fall back to where, you know, where they need to be. Your uterus takes a while to shrink back down. You know, your heart's larger, you've got fluids, you're going to bleed for, you know, 4 weeks, somewhere's upwards of 6 weeks afterwards. There's so many things we have to factor in. So when a woman is straight out postpartum, is we want to just kind of, you're not going to treat her like a flower, but you want to take the time to readjust and to also examine. And then, like I mentioned, in the rebuilding phase, which, you know, after at least 3, we're starting to look back at foundational patterning and really kind of.
I think it's caught up. We're energy. So with all those things, with all those things to take into account, I know it's a lot, and kind of moral of our talk today has been along the lines of we need some supervision with this, in terms of like having a professional you can work with, someone that you can have help along this journey, because there's just a lot of things that people can't do on their own. And I know you said whether that's with yourself or someone else, they should be seeking help with that. But if they were interested in working with you, what's a layout of next steps that someone has? So they want to work with you, they go to your site or go to your page. What's the sort of the next steps in that process to move forward? Do you do an initial phone consult to see if it's a good fit, or is there more information they can find on you? I think we're getting Sarah linked back up here. A little bit of tech difficulty.
Hey.
All right, Sarah, we're gonna give this one more try at. It's just been delayed. I don't know if it's on my end or not, but just want to wrap up with. So we're saying moral of the story: a lot of supervision needed for this process, and people should be seeking out some professional help. And like you said, whether that's with you or someone local, is more important to find the right fit for them. But for someone looking to, so they want to work with you, they go to your page, they go to your website. What's sort of the next step that you have for your potential clients in terms of the next steps they can take? Do they get in a phone consult with you? Is there more information they can find somewhere on your site, or what's the best way to find you to wrap up here?
Yeah, that's me at Jamieson at Movevolution.com as well. And that's a great way to start the conversation. From there, I usually will forward my intake form, and then we just set up a consultation to kind of talk shop and discuss what it is what that client is looking for and want to go. I like to keep things really simple, so.
All right. I think our tech thing's catching up to us, but Sarah, I just want to thank you
Okay.
for coming on. I know it's been I got a lot out of it, especially the first 40 minutes before I was trying to read your lips and let let the sound catch up. But I really appreciate you coming on. The video will be posted for the next 24 hours, I think, on Instagram for anyone that wants to see it after the fact, and I'll also upload it to YouTube and promote it on there. I'll get some clips up as well for this talk, and I'll have to have you on again sometime when I figure out all my tech issues as well. So thanks so much for coming on, Sarah. It's been a good time, and looking forward to chatting to you soon.
Perfect.
All right, take care.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks. Take care.